The METUS Tech Show.
Welcome to the METUS Tech Show, a show for HVAC professionals by HVAC professionals.
The METUS Tech Show.
So you guys, every time I'm in the office with you guys, you talk about all these different foods that you eat. And it got me thinking, where did you guys learn to cook?
I learned from watching my mother.
Okay.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, my mom and dad, pretty much Portuguese household. And Paul can probably relate to this. Anybody can relate to this, but have you ever woken up and heard the sound of a steam cooker?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That half,
little
yes,
pressure
with a
cooker.
little
Pressure
top,
cooker. Yeah, that's what
with
that's
the
what I
little
was
top
looking for.
swinging around.
Yep. So that's what I would wake up to on a Saturday or Sunday morning, boiled dinner.
Yes.
Not just that, but yeah, I was, always interested in what the heck was going on in the kitchen. I'd watch my mother cook. I'd watch my father cook. Sundays in my house were huge. I mean, there was always so much food in my house on a Sunday, and you never knew who was coming in the door. I mean, it was just like open to anybody. It wasn't just immediate family. It was cousins, and Paul knows exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, it would be cousins, uncles, whatever. I mean, friends. People would just walk in, and if you were anywhere near my house, the smells that would be coming out of my house from the malasadas, which is like a fried dough. My mother would make those in the morning. Roasts, soups, stews. It's just endless. And I took all that. I still know how to make all that food. And it blows my mind because my family members that were born in Portugal, some of them don't even know how to make that food.
Oh wow.
So a lot of them like reach out to me and say, hey, let's get together. Like we did this past Sunday. We hadn't done it in a long time. Let's get together, cook us something. Let's do a roast. We kind of planned it. Let's do a roast. Let's do some soups and stuff. And we'll invite a bunch of people over. And it was like it reminded me of back in the day because we haven't done that since all the parents and uncles and aunts, they've all passed away. So it's important. Watch what your parents are cooking, if they cook.
Yeah. When I was a kid, my paternal grandmother lived with us, and she had 10 kids, and they would all come visit her on a Sunday.
Yep.
So Saturday, my mother would spend all day cooking Saturday. She'd heat everything up on Sunday. Sunday morning, cooking, talk about the malasadas, the biscuits, the little cookies.
Yep.
She'd make all kinds of things. And of course, when you come over, she felt this need to have to feed people.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we just ate. Well, you must be hungry. Sit down and eat.
And if you're Italian, it's the same thing.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
They're going to make sure you are
Absolutely.
ready to
I
explode
remember-
when you leave that house.
I remember back in the day having 20 to 50 people, like you're talking about, Steve, and you just took me back using that pressure cooker.
Yeah.
And even though Mom taught me to cook many things in it, there's one thing that was my favorite. We would buy cans of condensed milk, and we would put it in the pressure cooker. We would fill it up with water. We would fill it up with water, right covering the cans, and we pressure cook it for 20 minutes. And we're actually cooking the milk inside the can.
Oh, I've seen this somewhere. Yeah.
Yes. And then we would open the can, and Mom would give me the can with a big spoon. And I would just eat that thing to town. It was like caramel.
So what is it, congeal or kind of get?
It's like a paste.
Sounds disgusting in a
Yeah,
way,
well,
it's
but I'm sure it
delicious.
was delicious. But yeah, that's interesting. That's really interesting. It's funny. Yeah, we used to have so many people come over the house, and some of them you want to strangle sometimes, but everybody would get along.
Two things. So I was a spoiled, rotten kid. I was the youngest of 5 boys, and I was spoiled, rotten. My mother's favorite, obviously. She hated all the other boys.
We have no witness to that effect.
But I really didn't want her cooking. She wanted to make this wonderful Portuguese food that I love now, but I'd rather make a hamburger. I'd rather, So she actually told me, you don't want to eat my food, you cook what you want. I was like 8, 9 years old. So I started cooking. Then I started watching her, and of course, then I turned 18. I joined the Army. I go away, and I was like, I would have killed for my mother's cooking. But you mentioned it was just like, if you have an Italian mother, you know what it's like. I lived fairly close. I was stationed in Washington, D.C., so it was an 8-hour drive home. These guys would live, 4,000 miles away, so I brought my roommate home with me on leave for a weekend. We just come home for the weekend, and my mother's feeding was, I thought you were Portuguese. I go, I am. How come your mother's Italian? She won't stop feeding me.
Yeah.
And we're all like 160, 170 pounds. And she goes, you guys are way too skinny. And there was no turning her down. You can't say no. My friend was like, tell your mother I don't want to eat. I go, no, you tell her. You just get up and smack her in the face. It's the same thing. So
Yeah, and we talked about
used
this
a lot of
bit.
garlic in our cooking.
Yeah.
So we loved each other until after we ate.
Yeah.
And we couldn't stand each other.
Yes, I was just going to bring that up. The ingredients. Paul and I talked about this a million times. There's no measuring.
no.
It's just a little of this, a little of that, and sometimes it's a little too much of this or a little too much of that. But it always seems to
It's
come
always
out
good.
so good. This past Sunday, it was like, I'm going to get some onions. I'm going to get some fresh garlic. Well, I got onion powder and garlic powder. No. We will use some
not
of
the
that,
same.
but no, we're using
both.
fresh.
I use both.
Yeah, use both. But yeah,
No.
it's so important to watch your parents cook. If they're still alive, definitely
Yeah, absolutely.
get in the kitchen with them and learn and watch everything that they're doing. And maybe your parents. Bryn just brought this up before. Maybe your parents just make American chop suey.
Yeah.
American chop suey is good.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
It
can be.
It can be.
It can be.
If your parents can't cook, don't watch them. Don't learn from them. But I was showing my wife how to make this kidney bean stew, feijão guisado. I can't remember.
Yeah.
And my brothers tell me it's just as good as my mother's. Tastes exactly the same, but starts off with sautéing onions. Every dish that I cook pretty much starts off sautéing onions and olive oil, a little bit of garlic, and then I take a frozen tomato. It's got to be a frozen tomato. I freeze it. When you run it under hot water and it's frozen, the skin peels right off, and you chop that up. It goes right in there. You sauté that too, and then it's just the broth, the bone broth, and then it's just the beans and the potatoes all diced up, and then some spices. There's some chorizo in there, some paprika. I was like, "How much you putting in?" I go, "I don't know. I can learn this from my mother. It's a guess. It just you go by eye.
Right. And you just know.
Yeah.
You just don't measure.
You can't tell me a quarter cup, teaspoon. I go, no, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Forget it.
And I still remember things like my dad would tell me, not too much salt because chicken bouillon has a lot of salt in it. The crushed hot Portuguese pepper has a lot of salt in it. So you got to think of all these little things, and there's no measuring.
And if you're using canned beans, like I prefer canned beans to the dry beans because they're easier. But I put salt in at the very end because they're full of salt.
Yeah.
The only downside to not measuring is because when I cook, I don't do that either. I'll kind of season to taste, and then somebody will ask you to make it for them again. And you're like, I don't even know how I don't know how much of what I put in there to make it taste like that.
You got to taste. You got to keep tasting.
So you just kind of guess every time.
They'll never know the difference.
I agree with you, Steve. You have to have the fresh garlic, the real garlic. You chop it up.
Oh,
you
yeah.
mince it. But then I take about 5, 7, 8, or 9 cans of the spices out of the spice cabinet, and I'll put them right next to me on the stove, and I'll look, I'm going to use this. I'm not going to use that. A little bit of cinnamon, maybe. Definitely the garlic. I'll use the fresh garlic. I'll mince it up. But I'm always going to use garlic powder on top of that, too.
Yeah.
And onion powder, even though I've used onions, but not just garlic powder and not just onion powder. No.
Yeah, and if you see a big jar of minced garlic in the store, it's not the same.
No, it's
I'm
awful.
sorry. It's not the same as
No.
fresh garlic cloves, crushing those up and unpeeling
Get
them.
you a garlic press and press it at home.
No, I just chop it up, and if it's big chunks. Garlic is nature's antibiotic. It's so good for you. It's got so many health benefits, and it keeps vampires away. I heard.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
good for hangovers, too. So,
I wouldn't know.
I wouldn't know either. All right, welcome to the METUS Tech Show. We got Juan Cardona coming at us from L.A. Juan's in L.A. this week. He's getting ready
Hola.
for our DSG conference next week. We're going to be pretty busy.
Yes.
We also got
2
Paul.
weeks.
Yeah,
2 weeks
some
worth
week in
of
general.
classes, right? So we're setting up cameras and doing all kind of stuff. We got Paul Shaves.
Hey, everyone.
We got Bryn Raptor.
Hello.
And we are going to talk about our new product, which was just released at the end of September. Mm-hmm. It's our s-MEXT precision cooling unit. And Paul and I are probably going to stay pretty silent on this one because Bryn is our product champion on this, and he knows quite a bit about this system. But if you've ever worked on Liebert units, any type of data room units, systems and stuff, the big thing with a data room, with any type of computer rooms, is humidity.
Yep.
And in the past with our systems, we were never able to humidify efficiently with a P-series system, where now we have this s-MEXT precision cooling unit. It has a built-in humidifier and a lot of bells and whistles, right? And we got actual electric heaters on this thing. We got water leak sensors. We have static sensors on here. And if you're familiar with the Corel type controllers, that's what we're using. So Bryn, take us into what this system can do. And let's talk a little bit about application. Where would our current offering be installed?
Yeah. So before we get into that, I just want to mention that when I started here, I was here for like 2 months, and we were down in Orlando filming some TechLink videos and helping Roland set up his training center. And I made the mistake of getting too curious about this product.
Yeah, when you owned it.
Yeah, and you walked up to me and said, "Hey, you're the new product champion." So then I had to learn how this thing worked. So it's actually a really cool product. Obviously, the main purpose of it, it's like a crack unit, computer room AC. We're calling it precision cooling, but it's basically the same idea. It's where temperature and humidity are important, right? So data centers, server rooms. I actually had some contractors in talking about dispensaries and the actual, growing facilities, that being so important for monitoring that heating and cooling and humidity in that space.
Are there any site visits coming up for those facilities?
And we have our first cut.
We can say that.
I'm available.
So
I'm Bryn.
Yes.
Bryn, I can understand, and I know the reason, but not everyone in our audience may understand it. In a server room or a data center, I can understand the amount of heat. So that's why cooling is highly critical. But humidity, why must we humidify a data center?
Yeah. So, even when it comes to these server rooms or data centers, the big thing is that we need year-round cooling, right? They generate heat, whether it's the middle of the summer or it's the dead of winter. They're going to be generating heat. So the whole purpose of this system is to be running cooling in low ambient temperatures. But the thing is that if we continue to cool down a space, what can happen is we start to lose humidity, and it's going to be too dry of a space. We have more potential for static electricity, and that's what can take out boards. And some of these servers are really important for the function of the building or the space. So in order for us to, mitigate that, we have these built-in humidifiers with the s-MEXT that allows us to maintain both a humidity percentage and a target temperature.
So first, before we get into the technical stuff, so what sizes are available?
So we have two different sizes. They are rated in kilowatts. One is 6 kilowatts, one's 13, but for American use, it's going to be a 24,000 BTU and a 42,000 BTU outdoor unit. And there are, two different models. We have what's essentially the base package, which is just going to come with your filter. It's a reusable, cleanable filter, MERV 8. And then we have a water leakage detector, and then the clogged air filter. It's essentially a pressure switch that gets mounted on the backside of the evaporator, so that if we're not drawing enough air through that filter and through the evap coil, we're not going to close the pressure switch. It's going to trip off on that low airflow sense.
We historically haven't had what we'd call a computer room unit, but and listen, when I get into this business, we were talking about this the other day. These computer racks, they were huge. They put out a ton of heat. Even a small insurance company would have this huge room. But now, the technology's improved. They're smaller. They don't throw out as much heat.
Sure.
And you can put it where we used to have a 500 square foot room. You can now put it in a closet.
True. Yeah, there is some of that. Yeah.
Right. So traditionally, hey, if you got a small closet like that, put a P series in there. It has to be a P series because you're going to have year round cooling.
Mm-hmm.
But the drawback is there's no humidity control. So this is, I think that would still apply for if you got a small office, a little server, 1 or 2 servers in a closet. That still applies.
Sure.
Now we're talking about the next level of computer room. You got a couple of mainframes in there and what have you. Now it's the s-MEXT is filling that need.
Yeah. Yep. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention is that's what I discussed prior was the basic package. We also have the larger package. That's what actually will come with the humidifier, return temperature and humidity probe. It still has the water leakage detector, the filter, but then we also get the electric reheat option.
Nice.
So there's a couple more features that come in the B package. Those are going to be more for when humidity is critical. You might be able to get away with the A package, which is the basic package, if humidity isn't as important for that particular space.
Yeah, so we keep saying computer rooms, data rooms, and everything else, but not just that.
No.
So Brandon and I had the pleasure of helping on a startup of a system that was installed in a guitar shop with very expensive guitars.
Yep. So
being a past musician myself, I know wooden acoustic guitars, when you get an older antique guitar, humidity plays a huge role in that. So that's a great application for this unit, right?
Yeah, I actually had a roommate once who had a room that he had kept all of his guitars, and he probably had 25 guitars in that room. And it wasn't a bedroom. It wasn't for anybody to sleep in. It was just for him to keep his guitars. He had a window unit going year round. Yeah. Just to maintain humidity because he didn't want anything to get, too moist in that room where you start to affect the guitar. So
I would imagine it being too moist or too dry would affect a wooden guitar.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It affects the sound. It affects the wood, as far as the wood quality, keeping it from cracking. So
what you want to prevent is the swing. So when it's really humid in the summer and you start to build moisture on that, wooden guitar, especially as varnishes start to wear off and then it dries out, you end up cracking. That's what happened to my first guitar. I left it in a storage unit and for a couple of years. And the swelling and the contracting, it ended up cracking. And then the other thing with the s-MEXT too is we have upflow and downflow. A lot of times these data centers or server rooms, especially once they get larger, sometimes they're on suspended floors. And with the downflow, we are actually able to mount that on that suspended floor and run that cool air, reheated air underneath through the suspended floor, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, through like a plenum, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. So let's talk about the install.
Sure.
What do I, as the installing contractor, need to know? I got my P-Series outdoor unit. I got my s-MEXT, the indoor unit. What do I need to know? I'm on the way out to the job.
Yeah. So the nice thing is it's like any other residential install. So you've got an outdoor unit and you've got an indoor unit. So you're running your refrigerant pipe. The difference is that the s-MEXT is powered separately. So unlike our traditional residential where we run S1, S2, S3 to that indoor unit, because not only are we communicating with that indoor unit, but we're also powering it off the outdoor unit, the s-MEXT has a separate power source. So we're really only running S2 and S3 from the outdoor unit to the indoor unit.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So we'd really just have to generate the communication. The power's not required. So we are still going to have line voltage on S2 and S3 to ground. That's normal, but we don't need that S1, S2 for that 208, 230 to power the indoor unit.
Okay, so the indoor unit is 208, 230, and it gets its own power source, and it gets from the outdoor unit S2 and S3.
Yeah, and the big thing with that too is we talk about it in class is the data stickers. The indoor unit, the s-MEXT itself, has its own data sticker that's going to determine your breaker size. Because remember, we have an option that is just the coil with a reusable filter, the fan, that's going to be a much smaller breaker than when we start adding humidifiers and we start adding electric reheat, right? So there's actually a stamp or a sticker on that indoor unit telling you what size breaker depending on what options are equipped.
That's important to know.
Yeah.
And the humidifier is not just a typical humidifier, it's a steam humidifier, correct?
Yep. So it's a steam humidifier. It's got 2 submerged probes that are actually heating that water up to 212. It's non-pressurized. So we're just generating that steam. It gets brought up to our supply and gets pushed out through the fan. One weird thing with the humidifier is the water inlet is threaded in 3/4 BSP or 3/4 G thread. So that's the non-tapered, like you would get on a end of a washing machine hose, that non-tapered thread that, your standard isn't going to fit on. So, when we installed it in our training center, that was the first thing we had to procure, is that adapter that gets us from that 3/4 inch G to 3/4 inch standard, allowing us for piping.
I'm glad you mentioned that. So if you're listening out there and you're going to install one of these, that's something that you're probably not going to have standard as a fitting, as part of your fitting that are in your truck. So get one before you get out there.
Yeah, and typically it can be tough even at supply houses. So it'd be worth getting that ordered, because typically that, not always, but you may have to order that part. So double check with your supply house before the install, and then order it if they don't have it.
Now, when I worked on Liebert units in the past, or just any data center units, they all communicated with each other. So if one system went into an error, all the screens on all the units would show that error. And that's important in a computer room or data center. Does the s-MEXT have that capability?
Yeah. So believe it or not, so Liebert is one of the brands that we hear a lot about with computer room ACs. Stultz is another one.
Yeah.
And it's kind of more similar to a Stultz from what I've found in my own digging through kind of what this is comparable to. However, we have what's called PLAN. We can basically use local area network between 10 indoor units. And that's for redundancy. It's for combining capacity. And it's for mitigating losing the space in case of an error. So if we have one unit that goes down on an error, our next unit will see that and kick on so that we don't lose that space. And we can do that with up to 10 units. We can also do it for rotation. So let's say we've got 2 units in there. One is your main, one is just used as redundancy. But we don't want to have all of the load on one compressor.
Right.
We want to be able to rotate. We can pick a daily rotation. We can pick an hourly rotation. We can pick a weekly or a monthly rotation, where unit 1 is going to run for 24 hours, or let's say it's going to run for 7 days, and then the next unit's going to run, so we can balance the load on the compressors. So we kind of have a, slow down the wear time on each compressor.
Yep.
So, we can do that and then also if an error, right? So if we lose S2 or S3, if we had a clogged air filter on one of our units, it would pick up that error code, shut down our main unit, and then jump to number 2. That one would start working. So there's a lot of things that we can do with the LAN, and I think that that's one of the biggest benefits to this, because we only go up to 42,000 BTUs. So because our larger unit is only 42,000 BTUs, if you have a data center that's, has a higher load than that, well, no big deal. We'll just put in 2. You can stack them right side by side. You don't need a ton of clearance on the left or right, because everything's accessible through the front door. So you put them side by side, you LAN them together, and now they're going to work together to make up that capacity.
Nice.
Yeah, one thing I noticed with we got this system very early on, and we set up a test unit in the back of the training center, and got to see this work. And it was actually, I tried to get it to work for about 2 weeks, and then you came in and got it to work in 5 minutes. Yeah. So so
it does come in Celsius.
I wonder how he did that.
It does come in Celsius.
But what I noticed is that this system has a very tight tolerance with maintaining temperature.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really cool. Can you talk about that and setting the temperature? And
Yeah. So, and part of that is because we have the electric reheat as opposed to a heat pump. So with a heat pump, there's that transition time where if we start to overcool our space, we've got to shut down our outdoor unit. We've got to switch over, power back up. And by the time we're actually generating heat again, it could be 5-10 minutes or so. With the electric reheat, we can, as soon as we start to overcool, we'll kick on our electric heat and start heating that space back up. So we have more control that way as far as temperature swings go. But even in the program itself, in the Corel controller, we can set a dead band of 1 degree. So I can make my heating set point 51 degrees and my cooling set point 50. Wow. I can do a 1 degree difference between my 2 set points.
And that's important. That's important for
depending on the application, it might be. And same with humidity. So it comes defaulted at 5%, but you can change that. But it's a 5% dead band on your humidity percentage. So you can float between 40 and 45% humidity, or you can narrow that down if you wanted to.
Excellent.
Yeah. So that's one of the upsides to, doing that over like a typical P-series indoor unit is it's designed for comfort cooling. So it's not going to be trying to target within a degree. It kind of gives a little temperature swing, about 2 degrees either side before it'll switch modes, just to kind of maintain comfort. It's not as critical. So a typical P-Series indoor unit has a larger deadband, which is good for comfort cooling, not so great for like a precision cooling application.
And where are you sensing the room temperature?
So it depends. You can choose between measuring your supply air and targeting a supply air temp, or you can target your return. If you have your humidifier, it's typically going to be your return air. So just like our regular indoor units, it's going to be pulling air back. We have our return temperature and humidity probe right in the front of the cabinet. That's what's picking up that temperature, telling us how to drive our compressor or humidifier.
So what if I want to put this system onto a BMS or BACnet? Is it compatible?
Yeah, so that is done through the Evolution controller. So on our Evolution controller, we have a slot called for your BMS card, and you're going to order, through Corel whether it's a BACnet or if you're using Modbus, some sort of third-party BMS, those cards just plug right into your Evolution controller, and they'll give you your terminal. So it might be an Ethernet cable, right, or a Cat5. It might be your 3 wires for something like Modbus, RS485. Yeah. Yep. And so the card is just allowing you to get those terminations, whether it's a Cat5 or those 3 wires for RS485. And what's actually cool, what I didn't realize at first, is inside the cabinet, we provide the termination resistor for that daisy chain. If it ends up being the beginning or the end of that daisy chain, we actually provide it in the cabinet, which is kind of cool.
So we recommend a PUY cooling only outdoor unit.
Yep.
Can we use a PUZ, or would there be any benefit in that, or will it not work with a PUZ?
There's no benefit to doing it. You won't be able to use it as a heat pump. So it's paired with a PUY, right? If we want to be able to heat that space, we're going to use the electric reheat, and we're not going to use the heat pump feature.
Yeah, there are some states out there where actually you cannot install a cooling only unit. You have to install a heat pump. Mm-hmm. And I think the plan for next year is to get it approved on a heat pump for that reason. But it doesn't make any sense. But because of the state regulations, I think we're looking at doing that.
Yeah, I actually had a train DSG asked me about that because he's in California, and that's where they ran into that issue. And as far as I'm aware, it will still run on a PUZ. But it gets paired. The official pairing is with a PUY. And so they'll have to figure out, what state's going to decide as far as what they can do.
And any pairing has to be tested before you can sell it like that. Whether it'll work or not is a whole different thing.
Right.
But before we can sell it that way, it has to be AHRI tested and so on. So
sure.
So what other kind of accessories can I get?
Mostly just some plenums. So there's a couple different types. There's just an open plenum where it's almost like an extension of the air outlet. It's just an open box. There's also a plenum that has 1 grill, front-facing grill. There's a plenum that has 3 grills on front and 2 sides. And then there's a silenced plenum, which has noise baffling inside of it. And that's just a one direction, just out through the front. And then the other thing for upflow is stands. So there's 3 different height ranges. They're all adjustable stands, and one is the small, medium, and large adjustment range, and that allows you to get some elevation on an upflow in the event that you're going to have drainage for your condensate pan, and your humidifier does have periodic drains as well in order to get gravity to a condensate pump or floor drain.
And you can't, with it having a steam humidifier on there now, if you're going to drain that, you can't just go into a standard condensate pump, which you would put on for just cooling condensate only. It has to be rated for that hot water.
Yeah.
And also the volume of water that it's going to put out there too.
Yep. Yeah. So the ones we have in the training center are like these external motor style high temp condensate pumps that can handle up to 210 degrees just for the potential of hot water being expelled. Typically with the humidifier, it's not going to drain its contents, like the entire contents of that humidifier, unless there's been 72 hours of inactivity. So that's when it would do a periodic drain. And the reason for that is to prevent scale buildup, right? If you have a lot of standing water for long periods of time. That's really
important with a steam humidifier. You have to dump it and get that water out of there to keep it clean.
Yep. So that would be the only time that it really, releases all of its contents. Typically it's, maybe some.
And I apologize if you've talked about it already, but do we recommend a inline water filter?
So it's recommended, but not required, right? It's just like any of our other hydronic products. Check the water quality. There's a table in the manual that will describe what your water quality what standards you have to meet. But typically, it's going to be some sort of filtered water, depending on the water quality in your area.
It's a good idea to always use a water filter because you don't know what you're getting for water. It's different everywhere. And I'm willing to bet you that no matter where you measure water, it's not going to meet the standards no matter where you are. So just put a filter in.
Oh, yeah.
It's something, it's inexpensive. It's easy to put in, valve it off on both sides. So it's easy for the end user to change it out or the maintenance guy or somebody.
Yep.
No, I noticed a lot of static airflow switches, safety switches. Can you talk about those?
Yeah. So as far as airflow goes, there's two. So inside the cabinet, they're stacked on the left-hand side. The bottom one is that clogged airflow that we talked about, or clogged air filter, excuse me. That's on the back side of the evaporator. So for those who don't know how a pressure switch works, it's set for a certain pressure, right? These are adjustable. Set for a certain pressure, and then there's a vinyl hose that gets mounted somewhere in the unit. And when we have airflow draw across it, it's going to pull in that switch. That airflow is actually pulling in that switch, closing it, allowing us to verify, okay, we have enough airflow. So that bottom one is for the clogged air filter. It's on the back side of the evaporator. If we don't meet that airflow standard on the back side of that evaporator, we're not getting air drawing over that vinyl hose. It's not going to close the switch. It goes off on clogged air filter. The one on top of it is for your fan. So the vinyl hose off of that goes all the way up the cabinet, and actually there's a little fitting off of the fan cage or the fan housing, and that vinyl hose goes in there, and it's doing the same thing. When that fan runs, it needs to close that switch. If it doesn't, it's going to go off on a loss of airflow alarm, and that's when you're going to be checking the fan side.
So if I'm looking at an upflow s-MEXT, I'm going to be expecting to see the fan on the top.
On the top, yep.
Yeah, and that's a centrifugal type fan. Okay.
Yep. Backwards curved blades, all that good stuff.
And downflow or the under model, right? Yep. Where is the fan located on?
It's going to be on the bottom.
It's going to be on the bottom.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Very cool. So I know some of our listeners are probably like, what does this thing look like? MyLinkDrive.com.
Yep.
And you'll see precision cooling. Click on that tab and you'll be able to see our spec sheets and our manuals that are in there and get a good look at what this unit looks like.
Yeah.
The different models and accessories that are available for it.
Yeah.
And this also, this should go without saying, but I wanted to make sure that it is understood. This is a one-to-one product, correct?
Yes.
Just like it is for data centers, you may have more than one s-MEXT, but it's going to have multiple outdoor units, like a one-to-one.
Yeah, which actually, in my opinion, is better. So
right, absolutely.
It'd be different if it was like some other ways that computer rooms are run is off of things like chillers, where they can reroute that chilled water depending on if a unit goes down. In our case, these are split style systems. They're split systems. Our outdoor unit is still an outdoor unit. Indoor unit is still an indoor unit. We want that because if we have a compressor failure for whatever reason on one of our units, we can kick on a whole separate one-to-one using our LAN. As opposed to if you've only got one and it's ported, you've got multiple units off a single outdoor unit. If that outdoor unit goes down, we lose the room, right? Whereas they're all one-to-ones. If one unit goes down, we'll just kick on another one.
Excellent.
How user-friendly is the controller? Is this like I need a 117-page quick reference guide, or is this pretty user-friendly?
It's about 250.
It's pretty user-friendly. It's very plain English. Navigating through, it's like it's only got 6 buttons on the main controller. One is to access the menus, and then it's just up, down, and enter to go through each of those menus. It can be a little bit overwhelming at first because of how much control you have over the system. So things like making adjustments to thermistor readings are all things that you can do. You can actually, if you've got, let's say, third-party temperature sensing in there, and that temperature sensor is reading 72 degrees, but you look at your unit and it's reading 71, you can actually adjust up that degree to match.
Oh.
So you can make tons of adjustments in the system, but it's all up, down, and enter. So it's not anything too crazy as far as making those changes. But there's a ton of information in there.
Yeah. So the one thing you mentioned, it comes out of the box in Celsius.
Yes.
So one of the first things you want to do is just change it to Fahrenheit, unless you're a Celsius kind of person.
Yep. Do you want the step-by-step to do it?
No, I don't want that because I'll forget it the minute you tell me. But it's a pretty simple thing to do.
Yes. Yep. So it's in your service menu. That's where pretty much all of the initial setup is. This is where we enable and disable our electric heater, enable and disable our humidifier, enable the periodic drain of the humidifier. Basically controlling all of the functions are all in that service screen of the controller. And I'll just give it away. If you go into service, password's 9990, and you go up to regulation 2, you'll find the measurement type, which is a weird way of looking at it. And there's 2 options, imperial and international. We want imperial.
Imperial.
That puts you in Fahrenheit.
That sounds easy enough.
Yeah, sure.
It took me like a week to try and figure that out, and I still didn't.
We got it, though. We got it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's a little bit, like I said, it was overwhelming at first getting used to the controller and how everything worked. Yeah. But once you start to mess around with it and play with it, like I get the luxury of having 2 in the training center, so I could set up the LAN and how it all works and get to play with that controller. And it's amazing because it is very user-friendly and simple. But if you want to, you can really dive in and get into some of the more intricate parts of how that thing functions, which is cool.
And speaking of the training centers, we have these installed in a few of our training centers now. The rest are going to get them. Mm-hmm. Some training centers, like for instance, we're not going to be able to fit this in our Manhattan training center. I'm sorry for the folks on the island of Manhattan, but the other training centers, if they're not already installed, they will be. And we have classes already on the schedule. We've got more coming up for next year. So if you want to take this, it's a 1-day class.
1 day. Yep.
A 1-day class. You come in, get your hands on the equipment. Bren's going to walk you through everything and everything you need to know.
Yeah, and we'll be preparing an e-learning too, which will be nice for those areas where we can't serve in the training center. We'll at least have e-learnings on our contractor portal that will kind of get you at least through that install, basic setup.
The things you need to know.
Yeah.
The things you need to know to get this going.
Yep.
So, Bryn, what are the operating ranges for the s-MEXT as far as outside air? What are the capabilities of the outdoor unit?
Yeah. So as far as outside temperature for the maximum, we can run about 100 up to 125 degrees outside air.
Wow.
Dry bulb. Dry bulb.
You got it. And then your minimum, if you have just the outdoor unit, is at 23 degrees. If you get the advanced wind baffle kit,
okay,
then that's when we get down to 5 degrees.
All right. Excellent.
Yeah. So as far as I know, that may change in the next year. I know we're working on trying to get that rating down, but right now it's at 5 degrees with that wind baffle kit. So just something to be aware of when ordering is if you are in a colder climate like we have here, or somewhere north of Virginia,
Mason-Dixon line,
Mason-Dixon line,
Mason-Dixon line.
If we see those 5-degree temperatures, just make sure you get that advanced wind baffle kit to get your rating down.
Yeah, but we do have plans. Next year, I believe, to introduce an updated model of the s-MEXT, which is going to go much lower than that, and we'll keep everybody updated on that.
Yeah.
The other question I wanted to ask is, and I think we talked about this before, Bryn, is we know the P-Series outdoor units do not come with MNet, but you can buy an optional MNet kit. What about the indoor unit? Does that have any MNet capability?
Not necessarily. So just like any other residential unit, like we do have on the PAC-IF board, which is our Mitsubishi board in the s-MEXT, we have a CN105, which we could put a Mac 334 on. We can do that route, or we can use a P-Series outdoor that kit that gets us on MNet, which is great because, if we already have an R2 system on the job site, we can pull that into our central controller and be able to monitor it. The only thing is that it only will monitor the Mitsubishi-related issues. So what that means is, let's say you have an s-MEXT in this, computer room, and it goes down for whatever reason for a clogged air filter or the water leakage detector. Those are Corel-related errors, so they won't show up on a central controller. The unit will shut down.
So that's what BMS comes in handy.
Yeah, that's nice. And realistically, you still can see temperatures. So there's a potential, at least you might see you losing the room, as far as seeing the temperature. But unfortunately, it doesn't alert you on a central controller, right? Because that's MNet language. Won't show you the evolution-related error codes.
Gotcha. But what if the outdoor unit, what if that system was on a central control and the outdoor unit had an error?
Yeah, so that'll still show up, just like it would with any P-Series unit, yeah. All
right, Bryn. Awesome. I'm glad someone was here on this podcast that knew what they were talking about on this unit.
You're the only one.
I'm excited. It's cool.
Bryn has been swimming in the s-MEXT Kool-Aid for a long time. Yeah. So he's our product champion, and he's got this unit down pat. So that's
as much as you can.
As much as you can, yeah.
Well, what's funny is I looked at the errors because you can go back 150 errors on that.
Corral
I'm sorry,
controller.
200, excuse me, 200 on that controller, 200 previous errors. We have the original error that we put into it when it was out back in the loading
Probably
dock
one that I did.
from November 23rd of 2023. So that's how long I've been working on it.
That's excellent.
That's about time. Next time, get it to us quicker, will you?
Yeah.
All right. Again, if you want more information on the s-MEXT, visit mylinkdrive.com, click on Precision Cooling, and you'll be able to have access to our manuals and submittals.
And
Right.
if you want to see when classes are available, go to MitsubishiComfort.com, scroll down the professionals and training, and find out where the training is. If you want to send us an email, Steve, what's our email?
METUS Tech Show at hvac.mea.com.
Yeah, we're laughing because you forget that all the
Yes,
time.
I do. You always get me with that one.
Yeah,
Or just
and
a
I'm
fan
sure
mail.
he's the only one that forgets.
And we also have a YouTube page.
Oh, this is,
Yeah.
So we used to manage that YouTube page ourselves, and we kind of did it when we had time. But now one of our developers, Faith, is actually doing a great job managing that. So it's
Faith
going to
is
have
awesome. Yeah.
It's not just going to have podcasts on there. It's going to have a bunch of other different things on there as well. So do you know our YouTube page address? Because I have no idea.
It's METUS Tech Show.
METUS Tech Show.
Yeah,
Okay.
just type in METUS Tech Show and subscribe, and you'll have access to a bunch of tech link videos that Juan has starred in. I was on one myself. Bryn did a bunch of them with Scott, and it's basically a conversation between a few techs on how to ohm out a compressor, how to check a thermistor. Think really cool stuff like that. There's also videos on there on how to dismantle the IntelliHeat A coil for horizontal right, horizontal left, upflow, downflow, and Jorge does a excellent job. That guy was made to be on TV.
Yep.
More than any of us, right? So, but anyway, yeah, awesome.
All right. Well, thanks, Bryn, for bailing us out on this one.
All right, so you getting your family together? Because Paul, you have like family all over the place here near the training center.
Oh, yeah.
You just walk out the door and wave at somebody. Like, that's my cousin.
Yeah, no, that's true. When we go to eat at the Portuguese restaurant, I just say hi to my cousin. He goes, it doesn't matter. One of them's my cousin. It's easy enough.
I have some family members that would love to be included in this.
Yeah, no, I can't go.
Do you still get together with your distant family?
Not like it used to be when my parents were
Yeah.
alive.
Yeah.
It's that generation. But, I was just telling somebody the other day, on my father's side, I have 51 first cousins, just on my father's side. My mother's side is a little smaller. There's 48, and I actually went to, in August, I went to a family reunion out in California in the Fresno area, and I met some cousins that I've never met before. I mean, my first cousin, I met her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I've never met them before, but it's still family. In my family, your fourth or fifth cousin, 7 times removed, they stop at cousin. You're still a family. And, when you get together and start cooking, you want to start a war, just tell a Portuguese woman that you had this great meal from another Portuguese woman. It's the best cook you've ever seen. And then you'll start this battle. Oh, yeah? Try some of this. And, you can't go wrong.
You know where I learned to cook? It wasn't growing up like you guys. I worked in a restaurant in my early 20s. And one of the cooks there was really passionate, and I just kind of got an interest in it. And I just asked him, how do you make a barbecue sauce? And he would give me the initial ingredients. And it's and then just do whatever you want, figure it out from there. This is the base, and this is what you do. And so I kind of fell in love with cooking later in life, because growing up it was Celeste pizzas, it was Hot Pockets, it was that American chop suey, which you can make good, like you said, but for us it was ragu, elbows, ground beef. That's it. Just all put in there.
Yeah, it's funny. So I follow on TikTok. I follow this little old lady. Her name's Nonna Pia, Italian cook, and I think it's her son or grandson that films her cooking different Italian dishes.
Yeah.
The other day she cooked sloppy joes, and I'm like, wait a minute, sloppy Joe. Nonna Pia's cooking sloppy Joe, and she started with the hamburg, and she threw celery in, and green pepper and onion. And I was like, celery and sloppy Joe, and we're like, well, where did you get this recipe from? Did this come with you from Italy? She's like, no, which is when I moved here, it was just an easy meal that we would make maybe 2-3 times a week. It's a cheap meal.
Yeah.
But the celery and the sloppy Joe.
Celery.
She's got something there.
Celery, onions, and peppers. It's the Trinity.
Yeah, the Trinity. Yeah. Yep.
A lot of meals have that in there. I love that stuff.
So I got to try that.
Good stuff.
All right, Juan.
I'm so Juan's
I'm
remote,
hungry.
Juan's use a
remotes.
restroom.
I just heard this voice that just come out of nowhere. I said, I forgot he was here.
Almost like
I am
Sergio.
hungry
Almost like
now.
yes.
Yes.
All right, we'll see you on the next one.
Take care, everyone.
All right, guys. Hasta la vista.